Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Divorce Differently podcast. This is another episode in our special series of Divorce Talks with Irwin Mitchell. Today, we're diving into a topic that affects many couples in the UK, but it's often surrounded by confusion. What happens when you divorce under Sharia law in the UK? Many people aren't sure how a religious divorce fits alongside the legal system and whether their rights are protected or additional steps might be needed for their separation to be recognized under English law. So, in this episode, we're going to unpack those concerns, explain how Sharia and UK family law interact, and help you understand what you need to know to be fully protected when separating. To talk about this, I've invited Sarah Al-Jourani. Sarah is a family law solicitor at Irwin Mitchell, and she speaks Arabic fluently. Sarah handles all aspects of family law, including divorce, financial settlements, and child arrangements, with a particular specialism in international and Sharia family matters. She's developed notable expertise in Islamic divorce and the cultural dimensions of divorce and child arrangements within Arab and Asian communities. Sarah, it's great to have you here. You are the expert in this field. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So could we start maybe with the basics and I think it goes without saying that there's major differences between civil law in the UK and Sharia law. Could you explain what the main differences are?
Yes, of course. So there's a lot of misconceptions about Sharia law, a lot of news articles and information you can find online that's just not correct. And it's a
Yeah.
little bit scary and a lot of, like I said, misinformation that unfortunately leads people to think that they don't have any rights or that they are in a position that's not, preferred,
Okay.
or that they're stuck. And that's not necessarily the case. So when we talk about Sharia law in England and Wales, especially from a family law perspective, we're
Yeah.
not talking about changing our legal system. And we're not talking about making Sharia law the law here. What
Yeah.
we're talking about is being sensitive towards people's religious and cultural beliefs
Yeah.
and finding a way in which we can make the two things work together
Hmm.
holistically. But at the end of the day, civil law and Sharia law are two very different things.
Yeah.
And our courts, our system, our jurisdiction is the laws of England and Wales. And as
Hmm.
a officer of the courts of England and Wales, as a solicitor who is registered in this jurisdiction, that's the law that I deal with day to day.
Yeah.
But for some of my clients who are Muslim, the most important thing for them is to deal with the matters from a Sharia perspective.
Yeah.
So what we do is we find a way to make the two blend where we can. So we build in Sharia aspects where possible, but we
Yeah.
still deal with everything under English and Welsh law.
Okay.
And there are circumstances where they don't blend. So
Hmm.
clients will, and I'm sure we'll talk about this, want, a Sharia-based financial settlement. And
Yeah.
it might not be possible. I might have to advise them, this isn't going to work in
Hmm.
terms of our legal system. It won't recognize it. But why don't we look at it from this angle? Why don't we meet
Yeah.
halfway? And it's just finding a way in which we can blend the two so that they work together. But at the end of the day, like I said, it's English and Welsh law. That's what we deal with. It's the law of the land. And the
Yeah.
Sharia aspect is just that added extra, that element that can be really important to some clients,
Yeah.
but just isn't legally recognized.
So you're looking for those areas of compatibility, really, where you
Exactly.
can blend in both. But of course, there are some elements I'm sure that aren't as compatible. Do people have this expectation with regards to integrating Sharia law into their English agreements? Is it mostly for religious beliefs, or is it because they want those agreements to be recognized abroad in countries that apply Sharia law?
It's both really. So some clients will come to me and say, unfortunately, we're now separating and we want a financial settlement which is compatible with Sharia law
Hmm.
because that's really important to us. Our
Yeah.
religion is very, very important, and we want to make sure that above everything else, we deal with this from a perspective that is halal, which is
Yeah.
permissible for Muslim. Other clients will say we need to deal with this from a Sharia compatibility perspective because we want it registered in Iraq or Pakistan
Yeah.
or Egypt,
Hmm.
wherever it might be, a country that builds Sharia law into its civil laws.
Yeah.
And then we deal with it from a two-pronged approach. We get lawyers
Yeah.
from that jurisdiction, we make sure that it works together, we look
Yeah.
at what's in the best interest of that client.
Hmm.
So it can really be both. And like I said, for
Okay.
some clients, this can be the most important thing. So
Yeah.
clients will sometimes come to me and say, I want a divorce. I've got an Islamic marriage and a civil marriage.
Yeah.
And all they care about is dealing with the Islamic side, even though the civil side is a side that impacts them legally here.
Yes. Yes.
That's the side that we have to deal with in order to get financial separation. And that's the side we have to deal with to get things legally recognized in this jurisdiction. But for them, their focus in that initial appointment is the Islamic side only. And that's
Understood. Yeah.
absolutely fine. Every client is different, every circumstance is different, but it's being aware of that and knowing how to kind of handle those matters sensitively, whilst understanding that, okay, from a legal perspective, the importance
Yeah.
isn't that high. From a
Yes.
personal perspective for that client, that's all they care about, that's all they want to deal with.
And I would imagine that a lot of these people who have that kind of priority in their head are people who also had a religious marriage to start with. And so is that marriage systematically recognized in the UK? So is the nikah ceremony enough? Or do they need to do anything else to start with for that marriage to even be something they could dissolve in the UK?
Sure. So this is a question that comes up quite a bit, and
Mhm.
it really depends on the circumstances. So,
Okay.
generally speaking, when you have a marriage that has taken place overseas,
Yeah.
our legal system will recognize it if
Hmm.
it was recognized in that jurisdiction to be legal. So, let's say you've had a gorgeous destination wedding in Barbados. Great.
Yeah.
And you've done everything you need for that to be legal and recognized in Barbados. It's recognized in England.
Hmm.
Where Islamic marriages come in and add that extra layer of complexities is it depends on the jurisdiction the marriage takes place in, whether
Okay.
they recognize Islamic marriages.
Ah, okay.
So we have those countries like I said, Iraq and Egypt and Pakistan, for example, that recognize Sharia marriages,
Yeah.
in which case you've had a Islamic marriage that is recognized in that jurisdiction,
Hmm.
that is then legal and religious,
Hmm.
essentially.
Hmm.
And our jurisdiction says, yes, you're legally married. And
Okay.
some clients will say to me, oh, but I never registered it in England. I didn't do anything. I didn't file any paperwork. But you don't have to. And not only do you not have to, but there is actually no mechanism anymore. There's no way, there's no route for you to do that.
It's
Um,
automatically recognized.
it is automatically. But then some jurisdictions won't recognize it. So you could have
Hmm.
an Islamic marriage in Germany, for example, and it
Hmm.
won't be recognized there under their legal system. So it won't be recognized in England.
Aha.
So you
Okay.
have to check and be really careful to know
Yeah.
exactly what your circumstances are. Similarly, with England, we don't recognize Sharia law, we don't recognize Islamic marriages only. And
Hmm.
therefore, clients will sometimes come to me and say, yeah, I'm married, I got married 20 years ago. Here's my nikah nama, my nikah contract, my Islamic marriage contract. That's great. Where's your civil contract? And they say, oh, I never had one. And they would have spent all of that time thinking that they are married,
Yes.
or vice versa. They come to me and say, as I said before, oh, I got married overseas, but I never registered it, so it's not legal here. And I have
Yeah.
to advise them the opposite. So it's really important to take that advice at the outset. And I know
Yeah.
hindsight is wonderful, but it can really, really make a difference in terms of the outcome. If you are to separate, you are to divorce.
So if you got married in the UK under Sharia law, you wouldn't that wouldn't be sufficient. So you could, the example you gave, show up 20 years later asking for a divorce and be told you weren't married in the first place.
Exactly. And for some people, it can really benefit them to have just an Islamic marriage. So,
Yeah.
if you are a financially stronger party, in
Hmm.
some circumstances, I've advised that client and said, look, if the only thing that's important to you is being Islamically married so that
Hmm.
you can live together in a manner which is permissible under Islamic
Yeah.
law, then just have your Islamic marriage.
Yeah.
Because if you then have a civil marriage as well, yes, there are tax breaks and inheritance benefits and things like that, and pension benefits when you are legally married. There are also a lot of risks to your assets at that
Yes, if the
point.
marriage
And
breaks
we're then
down. Yeah.
looking, exactly, we're looking at prenups and postnups and building in Sharia law. Whereas if you just have an Islamic marriage, That's the
Hmm.
best way to protect yourself while still getting the outcome that you want. And you
Yeah.
can still have a party and a white wedding and wear a dress and whatever else, and you can still celebrate, but
Yeah.
we just make sure that we don't tick those boxes to make it a legal
Yeah.
marriage.
Yeah. And so in terms of I guess the process, or I was going to use the word ceremony, which is not the right word for a
Sure.
divorce, but in terms of the actual process of divorce, how is the process different whether you're getting divorced under Sharia law or in a civil divorce in the UK?
Sure. Well, it's very different.
Mm,
Um, and it's quite funny because it's a little bit similar to how it used to be post 22 when we had a new law come in England and Wales to change the fault-based divorces to now
yes.
be no fault divorces. Whereas Islamic law, we still have fault-based divorces.
Hmm.
So there's kind of three ways in which you can divorce. The first
Okay.
one is where a husband divorces his wife,
Yeah.
and he does that through what we call a talaq.
Hmm.
And again, lots of misconception, lots of misinformation online about this. And you've probably heard of triple talaq, where you say it three
Yes.
times.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's been, episodes of soaps on television like EastEnders where it's been really dramatic and husband said it three times, but that's not quite how it works and not quite what the interpretation is. So
Okay.
the husband only needs to say once, only one time
Okay.
to his wife, very clearly, I divorce you. And
Hmm.
that's it. We then have a 3-month calling off period known as the
Hmm.
idda. And
Okay.
during that period, it's to give the chance for the parties to reconcile, to think
Hmm.
about it, to have that cooling off, if you will.
Yes.
And if they don't reconcile within that period of time, that's it. They are then divorced.
So there's no
Now,
outside intervention. It remains completely between the couple, really.
completely between the couple.
Yeah.
Ideally, there are scholars and imams and religious leaders that will say it's best done in front of witnesses, it's best
Okay.
done in writing, it's best done in this and that. But it doesn't have to be in order for it to have taken place.
Okay. So
Now,
very
where
different to our very administrative process in
very,
England and
yeah,
Wales.
very different. And
Yeah.
some people say it's cruel and some people say it's quite harsh, but it's the way it is. Now,
Hmm.
where the triple talaq comes in is if the parties did reconcile during that cooling off period,
Oh.
they then jump back into the marriage. But the husband is already, it's almost like strike one. He's given
Yes,
that
he's
first
already
talaq.
used one of his three.
There you go. So then the parties that say they've reconciled and a year later they fall out again, he says it one more time, that's strike two. If they
Okay.
reconcile again during that period of time and he gives it a third time, the
Hmm.
third talaq is irrevocable. That's it.
Ooh,
It's
okay.
final. So we still have the cooling off period to make sure that wife isn't pregnant,
Okay.
in which case it gets delayed, but let's say she's
Okay.
not. Once that 3-month period finishes, that's it. They are divorced. But
Okay.
not only are they divorced, they cannot remarry
Oh,
unless wife marries somebody else, divorces him or becomes widowed, and then she becomes available to the husband again, to husband number one.
okay.
So the 3 talaqs are given as kind of a very serious responsibility for the husband, and to make sure that the parties have that opportunity to reconcile and really
Yeah.
think about it. But if this hasn't worked 3 times, it's probably not going to work. And then
Yes.
that's
Yeah.
why the rules are the way they are. Now, what some husbands will choose to do is say talaq all at once, those 3, they'll give them all
Okay.
at the same time. And some countries have actually criminalized that. They've made it a
Oh,
criminal offense
okay.
due to how cruel it is to the wife to say, not only am I divorcing you, but I will never, ever remarry you unless all of these other things
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
Um, and that's why there's a lot of different opinions about it and a lot of opinions on whether it's permissible, whether it should be done that way. But quite honestly, it's like I said, it's very dramatized and there's a lot of misinformation. And I will get a lot of clients that come to me and say, oh, I've only had one talaq, so I don't think I'm divorced yet. And it's not quite how it happens.
Yeah.
So that's the first method. Now, the second method is when the wife asks for the divorce. So she will
Hmm.
say, I want a khulla.
Okay.
And she will do that by essentially asking the husband for his consent for the divorce, but she's
Okay.
the one requesting it.
Hmm.
And the reason for that kind of difference in the process is all to do with the meher, which I can only translate as the dowry, but it's not
Yeah.
quite the dowry, it's a wedding gift. And
Okay.
essentially, if the husband requests the divorce, the wife
Hmm.
gets to keep it and she gets anything
Okay.
outstanding.
Hmm.
And if the wife requests the divorce, she has to give back anything that's been given to her, and anything
Mm,
outstanding is written off.
okay.
Now, this gift can be anything, and I've seen it ranging all the way to $400,000 in cash.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so it can be
So
a
there's
lot.
implications there. Yeah.
There are a lot of implications. It can be cash, it can be gold, it can be property, it can be a Quran and a rose, it can be
Hmm.
anything at all. But because of that, and because a lot of the time it's family gold, and then the family gets involved and it becomes really sensitive, some of the husbands will sadly use this to say, well, I'm refusing to give you a divorce. You're the one who has to divorce me, so that they get that gold back.
Yeah.
So you see where that kind of crossover comes into English law, because we don't recognise that
No,
under English
no.
and Welsh laws. How do we deal with it? So that's the second way of dealing with it. But again, the husband needs to consent and engage. Now, if he doesn't, or if the wife doesn't want to go through that route because she doesn't want to give the dowry back because it's not
Hmm.
fair, because the
Yeah.
husband's had an affair or he's done something that's not permissible,
Hmm.
then she can apply for a fasakh, which is
Okay.
essentially where we dissolve the marriage. So she will go to an Islamic body, the Sharia
Yeah.
Council, for example, and she will
Hmm.
make a petition, and
Hmm.
she will say, I want you to dissolve my marriage because my husband has not met his conditions of the marriage. He's not
Okay.
looked after me. He's not provided for me. And within the Nikah contract, you can apply any conditions you want. So you can say,
Oh,
I
okay.
want a cleaner once a week.
Yeah.
And if, for example, he then doesn't give a cleaner once a week, you can divorce him and say he's not met this condition. So the
Interesting.
panel will meet, they'll discuss with the husband, they'll discuss with the wife, and they'll make a decision similar to our judicial process.
Yeah.
And if they find that he hasn't met those conditions, they will dissolve the marriage, and the wife generally gets to keep the mahar, the dowry.
Yeah. So they do have, there's one of the options that I guess is similar to our idea of a court of law, where there's
Yeah,
a third party intervention, but that's not at all mandatory. There's
no.
a lot of other options. And so for the first two options you mentioned, which is kind of the DIY version, are those recognized in England? So if you are legally married under English law, would that type of divorce be recognized in England and Wales, or would you still have to go through the civil law process?
Well, similar to what we talked about in terms of the marriage overseas,
Hmm.
it depends on where it takes place. So the
Okay.
Islamic divorce here will have no bearing whatsoever. So
Okay.
sometimes I will have clients who were essentially running three matters for, we're dealing with the Islamic divorce, the civil divorce, and the finances, sometimes
Yeah.
even children. So we have
Yeah.
four matters kind of running concurrently. If you divorce your spouse overseas in an
Hmm.
Islamic way, and that country recognizes it, and you fall within the remit and follow everything that's required under specific provisions in the Family Law Act, then it
Yeah.
could be recognized.
Okay. So same, yeah, exact same answer as for the marriage, basically. Eh,
Exactly. It really depends on the jurisdiction. It depends on how it was done. And there are cases that have come up more and more often now that look at this. And there was a particular case a few years ago of Hussein and Parveen, and they talked about transnational
mhm.
divorces. So the husband gave the talaq here, but
Yeah.
then finalized the process and did all the paperwork and divorced his wife in Pakistan. And the court
Okay.
said you can't do it transnationally, it's got to all be in
Oh.
one place.
Oh, wow.
So,
Okay. So that adds
yeah,
complexity too.
a lot of nuances, a lot of
Yeah.
complexities. And again, that's why it's important to get advice, make sure you're doing it right at the
Yeah.
outset so that you don't have to try and unravel all of this after, because it could be beneficial to divorce overseas
Yes,
and it could
you need
work in your
to
favor.
understand.
Yeah, so you want to take advice in those jurisdictions. You want to take advice in this jurisdiction, understand how it applies, where it applies, and how you can make sure that you mitigate anybody making an application to say that's
Yeah.
not valid, that shouldn't, be the case here.
And what about the flip side of that? Then, if you get divorced, if you're a practicing Muslim and you got married under Sharia law, and you're suddenly getting divorced in an English court of law, do they need to then duplicate the process through, according to Sharia law, or is it sufficient to have done the English process?
So it depends on the client themselves and their level of, I guess, religious belief, because the civil process doesn't end the religious marriage.
Okay.
And some clients will say to me, when shall I do it? what's the process? When do you advise I get on with this? And
Yeah.
quite honestly, it's looking at being practical, because
Hmm.
the English system will take around about, say, 28 to 30 weeks if we're doing it quite quickly and the court's on board and moving quite quickly. But if we can get divorced in 30 weeks, that's a lot longer than the talaq process, even the
Yes, for
khulwa
sure.
process. And once the Islamic marriage has ended, it's no longer permissible for two parties to live together of the
Yeah.
opposite gender.
Yeah.
So I will often say to my clients, look, if it's going to be a matter of us dealing with it from a civil perspective, you might not be divorced and we might not deal with all of this until some point next year, 12,
Hmm.
16 months down the line, if we're dealing with finances. Your Islamic divorce could be over and done within the next 3 months. So
Yeah.
then, are you going to move out? Are they going to move out? Do you have the funds to do so? We can't force them out unless there
Yeah.
are certain things that apply. And therefore, how do you feel about that, about living essentially in a way that's non-permissible?
Yeah.
So our Islamic system won't say, oh, yeah, you're divorced legally.
Hmm.
But what some Sharia councils and some Islamic leaders will say is, if you have dealt with it in the courts of that land, so
Yeah.
England and Wales have divorced you and you've had a
Hmm.
legal divorce, then they're more inclined to go through that dissolve process, because
Okay.
you've already participated essentially in a process in another jurisdiction, you've ended your marriage, you've made it clear that this isn't working, and they use that as a bit of weight or evidence to their decision.
Yeah. Yeah. So you raise a good point around timings. So you'd want to make sure that that basically you don't get divorced under Sharia law until you're actually ready to move out, or one of the two is ready to move out.
Exactly. And it's really
Yeah.
important for me as a Muslim lawyer who deals with this to advise my clients of these things and to think of
Yeah.
these things. Now, some of my clients will say, oh, it's okay. I don't mind. I'll live with them. I deal with it. And that's absolutely fine. That's their
Yeah.
prerogative. And other clients will say, oh, I'd not realized. Yeah, absolutely can't do that. Let me divorce later. So it's
Yeah.
just, like I said at the start, it's those nuances where we've got that mix. And it's not necessarily saying I'm doing Sharia law in England, but
Yeah.
it's how can these two processes work together
Mhm.
simultaneously in a way that benefits the client and meets
Yeah.
all of their needs and
Makes
ticks all the
sense.
boxes they have.
Now, I assume that rules within Sharia law for with regards to financial and how those assets are split upon divorce are different to the ones in England law, in English law. If a couple consents and agrees to divorce under the rules of Sharia law and split assets accordingly, would that be recognized in English court? Would that be recognized as a consent order, even if it doesn't meet the criteria of fairness that they might apply in an English court?
Sure. So Sharia law, as you said, is very different. The
Mhm.
way that Sharia law looks at it is essentially as if the couple are cohabiting in England and Wales and they're not married. So
Okay.
you just take into the marriage whatever's in your name, and
Yeah.
anything during the marriage you acquire that's in your name is yours.
Mhm.
And when you
Okay.
end the Islamic marriage, you part ways, you take what's yours.
Yeah.
Anything jointly purchased, like a joint home, we split 50-50 unless there's evidence you put more in. So pretty
Okay.
much exactly as if you were
Yeah.
cohabiting. Now, our legal system obviously has a few principles that differ from that completely. Where we look at matrimonial assets, we look at sharing, we look at
Hmm.
needs. Sometimes, especially if it's a short marriage and there wasn't much intermingling and the parties are really young and their needs will be met by their own income in time, then it
Yeah.
might be that we can have a clean break. And
Yeah.
it's very simple, very easy to deal with. And that way you do have a essentially Sharia based financial settlement
Yeah.
within the confines of the laws of England and Wales.
Hmm.
However, if it's been a very, very long marriage, let's say wife hasn't worked, but she's contributed to the household, husband's been working, house is in his name, everything else, then our legal system is very unlikely and impossible to say, yeah, that's fine. Husband takes everything because it's all in his name and we leave
Yeah.
wife with the children with nothing. So in some circumstances, we can mix the two and you can find those sweet spots, but
Yeah.
otherwise they are quite different. And again, when we talk about the meher and the dowry, often that's one of the biggest things. It's huge
Yeah.
amounts of gold or cash or land. And it's knowing how we deal with that from a religious and cultural aspect and from a
Yes.
civil aspect, because our legal system isn't going to say, oh, yeah, that's fine, it's yours because your nikah contract said that.
Yeah.
But it's having those conversations to start with to see, well, how do we deal with this? And
Yeah.
what are the arrangements between the parties? Because sometimes you'll find somebody is very religious when it works in their favor and not so religious when it doesn't. So it's having those conversations. Sometimes it's bringing in Islamic mediators, family members, understanding those cultural nuances of
Yeah,
the leader within that particular community who everybody listens to and what they have to say on it, to
yeah,
get the parties together to reach something that they find to be a fair settlement, and then
yeah.
dealing with the rest under English and Welsh law.
So is one solution to kind of future-proof your nikah by making sure that it would work under that whatever clauses you've put in there would work under English, assuming you're going to, be in England if and when you divorce. But could that be a way of securing the terms that you've wanted to put in place?
That's exactly what it is. So it's looking at doing a prenup or a
Yeah,
postnup, but I'll use the term, but a Sharia based prenup or postnup.
yeah,
So it's building those provisions in as long as it works and the clients will be advised on it. Is this likely to meet the criteria? Is the judge likely to sign off on this if we were
yeah.
divorcing? Are your needs met? What we bring
Hmm.
into the table? And of course, a prenup or a postnup is a live document. It's always
Yeah,
changing when the circumstances change. If we bring children into it, are things going to be different now? But yes, that's the best way to deal with it. Or like I said, getting that advice at the outset of, well, what are the benefits of having a civil marriage? Is
yeah,
it just an Islamic marriage? Because if you have just an Islamic marriage, you're essentially going to have your Sharia based financial
yeah.
separation,
That's true.
but you're going to lose out on a lot of the civil aspects of it, or like I said, the benefits that you get in terms of inheritance and
Hmm.
pensions and tax and whatever else. So it's balancing the two and knowing what works for that particular
Yeah.
client.
Yeah, and that's where having a solicitor like you is invaluable because you have all of that experience and insight to avoid those kind of issues later on and
Sure.
protect people. And so how about with children? Are there major differences in how law deals with children on divorce versus the courts if there were disagreements?
So Sharia law with children is very different to the point that there is no way of kind of bringing the two together in terms
Oh,
of Sharia and civil law. Yeah.
okay.
So under Sharia law, parents have very specific roles: guardianship and custodianship.
Yeah.
And the father is essentially the guardian. He will
Mhm.
always be the guardian. He will always have the role of looking after the children's education, finance, and kind of that signing off on things and travel and whatever else.
Yeah.
The mother is the caregiver. So
Hmm.
she's there for everything the children need in terms of care and attention, and especially in their early years. And
Hmm.
once they hit puberty, which every country will say something different about in terms of what age they set
Yeah.
that essentially ends. So it's very, very different to the roles of the parents in England and Wales, where we have
Yeah.
parental responsibility and they're both
Yes.
equal. So there's
Yeah.
no way of kind of bringing the two together and making them merge. But the things that are important to think about when I deal with child arrangements is the involvement of external family members, so
Yeah.
extended paternal and maternal families, because within the culture, so not necessarily the religion, but the Middle Eastern culture or Southeast Asian culture, the Islamic culture in general, there are a lot of families where their extended families are involved.
Yeah.
Potentially they're all living together. So it's looking at how we deal with this in a way that means that the children still get to see their grandparents who they've
Hmm.
spent the last however many years living within the same home.
Yeah.
How we deal with things like Eid, which is our religious celebration,
Yeah.
and doesn't fall on the same day every year like Christmas, which is much
Yes.
easier to calendar. So Eid changes. There are two Eids within the year. There can be really big celebrations, and it's important to know how we deal with that. We deal with things like funding for Islamic schools. So a lot of children will go to a Saturday or Sunday school to learn Arabic and learn the Quran.
Yeah.
Who's going to pay for that? Are the children going to go? And sometimes I deal with children matters where one parent is Muslim and the other isn't. And now they've
Ah.
separated, and there are arguments about whether the children should go to an Islamic school,
Hmm.
should be circumcised,
Yeah.
should eat
Should eat
halal
pork.
food.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I
There
had a
you go.
client like that, indeed, where she wasn't Muslim, and upon divorcing, she started having pork in the house, and her husband was very upset because they had they had never had that
Yeah.
before, and it was one of the principles that he thought was agreed upon.
And that's it. And it's really difficult because the courts don't want to make these decisions, the judges don't
Yeah,
want to make these decisions,
yeah,
and it's hard, but the children's welfare will always come first and always be the
yeah.
primary consideration. And there are a lot of different aspects that are looked at by the courts and by judges making these decisions. But ultimately, if the parents can decide between themselves, that's the
That's the
best thing.
ideal
And
because
you
then they
can
can
see
do
why
whatever they
it's
want. Yeah,
exactly. And you can see why it's important to clients, especially those that are very religious who maybe didn't ever anticipate this happening. But you can also see it's important to the other parent who
yeah, of
doesn't want
course.
their child to feel left out if their
Hmm.
siblings or their cousins or whoever else aren't eating halal food or the
Hmm.
school doesn't provide it. So it's a really sensitive subject, one that I think you have to approach with care and attention. But
Yeah.
it's ultimately down to the parents really to try and reach an agreement if they can. Otherwise, it's in the hands of the court.
And are there mediators that are specially trained or maybe themselves are Muslim and who have that specific experience of understanding Sharia law and helping couples to embed that into their agreements?
Yeah, there are. So a lot of clients tend to go to their local imam
Okay.
or um, somebody that they know within the community for, I say mediation, it's a form of mediation.
Yeah.
Essentially, it works the same and they try and help them reach an agreement. But there
Hmm.
are also mediators in England and Wales who are Muslim, who do have
Hmm.
this background, who are very good at, again, balancing those cultural
Yeah.
nuances and knowing how to deal with it in a sensitive manner.
Oh, that's really helpful. That's great to know. Thank you so much, Sarah. There's so much helpful information here. I could keep on picking your brain all day.
I'm
But
sure.
we've got a lot of very useful information. I will include your email address in the episode notes. So if anybody wants to reach out for advice or for more information, they can do so and contact you directly. But in the meantime, thank you very, very much for joining me. It's a
Thank you for
really,
having me.
really interesting episode, and have a great day.
Thank you, you too.